Okay, continuing about the First Continental Congress, some other important facts to know. No one really was in charge of the First Continental Congress. We had many leaders, but there was no official commander. But everyone sees that conflict is imminent. There's no genuine drive towards independence. They're just, again, trying to protest what's going on, and hopefully the government in England will listen. So they did start to gather forces. You've heard about the Minutemen. They originally were formed to defend against Indians and French and other hostiles in the area. But we do all see now that conflict may be imminent. Um, Boston is sort of the center of anti-British sentiment. And after the Intolerable Acts and the last group of acts we talked about, Britain passes the Restraining Acts, and this is sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back. As silly as it sounds, they prevented fishing off the northeast coast of Massachusetts and all English waters on the east coast. So you're killing an economic opportunity, and you're actually killing people because they're losing a valuable food source. So British General Thomas Gage is going to lead the British battalions in Boston. And if you've heard of him before, we talked about Fort Duquesne a little bit. He was involved with General Braddock's expedition to Fort Duquesne. And he was given the right and the authority to use British troops versus the colonists in 1775. So something is about to happen. So goals of Thomas Gage sent troops. He wanted to seize two of the most important men of this resistance movement, seize Samuel Adams and John Hancock. For a couple reasons. They were the best smugglers in the area, and they were getting around these Navigation Acts and Sugar Act and all these other sort of intolerable acts we talked about. They were the leaders of the Boston Tea Party and the Continental Congress. So they're very important men, and his goal is to go get them. So the point was to notify the men that they were coming. That's the whole point of the one torch, two torch. We'll talk more about that in just a second. And this is really the job of two guys, Paul Revere and William Dawes. The whole thing of the British are coming, that's not true. Because at the time, the colonists still considered themselves British. So to yell out, the British are coming, would just confuse the colonists. So not really accurate from what we heard when we were all very, very young. Okay. Here's a picture of Paul Revere. This is by a man named John Singleton Copley. His wife was a loyalist, which again means that they supported Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. So Lexington and Concord. Okay, if you look at a map, if you're looking for Concord and Lexington, they're both sort of northwest of Boston. The fighting begins April 19th, 1775. And this is the thing that you've all heard about. How is Paul Revere going to know? How are the people going to know that the British are coming and how they're coming? Well, the Old North Church in Boston, there's going to be one lamp in the window if it's by land, and there's going to be two if it's by sea. So the first fighting begins in Lexington. There's 240 Brits versus 70 Minutemen. The British win. They killed 7 colonists, and then the British were off to Concord. They're off to Concord at the North Bridge. Eventually, we have large groups of Minutemen that intercept them, and 125 casualties to the British. In total, these two battles, we have 73 British soldiers killed, 26 missing. So we have roughly almost 100 British are casualties here, killed or missing from these two battles. So very bloody battle, and of course we all know what happens next. So just to recap, we're talking about James Otis. He laid the basic intellectual foundation for this revolution, fairly unknown. We know some of the founding fathers. A lot of us don't really hear too much about James Otis. He's the one that came up with the phrase, taxation without representation is tyranny, no taxation without representation. And he was really one of the first ones to take a stand against the British. He was Attorney General of Massachusetts. He resigned because of those writs of assistance, those basically warrants that allowed the British to basically go on anybody's property and any ship and check for smuggled goods. Unfortunately, he was hit in the head during a bar fight with a British soldier. He was hit with a sword in the head, and sort of lived out the rest of his days as sort of an invalid. He wasn't very lucid. And as strange as it'll sound, he later died by being struck by lightning. So it's important to know that although he died being struck by lightning, he definitely helped spark the revolution. I hope you like that. Okay, that's the last video. And after this, we are on to the revolution.